Yeah. Y'all know what it is. Y'all know who it is. It's your boy Pharaoh, the guy always on the job. And I got five. Let's talk. And as always, it's real talk, raw talk. And y'all know it's that time again to tell a friend, to tell a friend, to tell another friend. It don't cost you much to touch, so go ahead and reach, hit that like button, subscribe, share, and welcome to another episode of I Got Five, Let's Talk. As you know, I'm your host, the man behind the voice. Today, we continue the war report. It's no secret. But today we switch gears and shed light on another part of the world that's going through a major transfer. And the same things that are plaguing Africa, Burkina Faso, is the same manipulators of the Iran-Israel war. It's dealing with the same thing that Iran is dealing with, waterways, maritime law. Why are these certain entities lining up in order to take over waterways, passageways for oil, commercial passageways for grain, fertilizer, all type of things that people trade? Why are these entities focusing in and trying to take over land that is connected to this body of water? Do you think that it's just by coincidence that all these countries, that France, Israel, America, and the UN or NATO is facing in Africa or the near Middle East or Middle East, all has to do with bodies of water or gold? Not really so much of regime. That's the lingo to get you pulled in. Regime change. This is wrong. That's wrong. So today I just want to take people down the rabbit hole of how even in Africa, and you will see in this content, if you pay attention, I always say that they expose themselves when not trying to expose themselves. And through this content today, you're going to see certain things that I will also point out of how they're exposing themselves. So without further ado, man, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, tell a friend to tell a friend to tell another friend. It don't cost so much to touch. Come and lock in with the hottest podcast where you can get your worldwide politics live and direct in your set. From a different perspective though, man, without the bullshit though, I just want to bring about it in a different perspective, because like I always say, these wars are affecting us. And if people don't wake up, or people don't continue to point out the bullshit, we gonna forever be asleep. We gonna forever be manipulated. Let's run this content.
6th, 2025, Benjamin Netanyahu picked up the phone and made a call that he believed would reshape the strategic map of East Africa and the Red Sea forever. On the other end of the line...
Hey, shout out to my mind, shout out to my mind, shout out to the guys. Hey, Sticky, man, it be tweaking, man, these comments. Sometimes I'm able to see them and sometimes I'm not, man. But shout out to my minds always in the building, man. yeah, a lot of people don't see the okie doke. A lot of people don't recognize it, and that's what I just plan to do with the war report. I'm not here to take a side. I'm not here to, but I am here to point out what's right and what's wrong. I am here to point out the flaws and the inconsistencies of our American foreign policy. So yeah, man, without further ado, I just wanted to say shout out to the mods. I see them comments, man. Hit them comments, indulge, man, interact, support the channel, support your boy, and above all, man, support the movement.
On December 26, 2025, Benjamin Netanyahu picked up the phone and made a call that he believed would reshape the strategic map of East Africa and the Red Sea forever. On the other end of the line was the president of Somaliland, a breakaway territory in the Horn of Africa that has been seeking international recognition since 1991, over 3 decades of diplomatic isolation with nothing to show for it. By the end of that call, Israel had become the first country in the world to formally recognize Somaliland as an independent state. Netanyahu called it a seminal and historic moment. He pledged to open embassies. He promised to advocate for Somaliland's inclusion in the Abraham Accords directly to Donald Trump. And he positioned Israel as the pioneer of a new geopolitical reality in one of the world's most strategically critical maritime corridors. Within hours, the reaction from Mogadishu, Cairo, Ankara, and Riyadh was explosive. Within days, Somalia had canceled every defense and security agreement it held with the United Arab Emirates. Within weeks, Saudi Arabia had signed a military cooperation memorandum with Somalia, began assembling a regional coalition that spans Turkey, Egypt, Eritrea, Djibouti, Pakistan, and Qatar, and had effectively forced the UAE out of both Yemen and Somalia in the same month. What Netanyahu thought was a masterstroke turned out to trigger a countermove so swift, so comprehensive, and so geopolitically consequential that analysts at the Gulf International Forum are now describing it as Saudi Arabia's most calculated strategic play in the Horn of Africa in living memory. This is the story of how Mohammed bin Salman turned a single Israeli diplomatic announcement into the opportunity to block the UAE-Israel expansion in Africa, assert Saudi dominance over the Red Sea corridor, and rewrite the rules of Gulf engagement in East Africa. Every detail in this script is documented, verified, and drawn from the most credible geopolitical institutions on Earth. This is not opinion. This is what actually happened, and why it matters more than almost anyone in the Western world is currently paying attention to. To understand why the Israeli recognition of Somaliland hit Saudi Arabia and the broader region like a strategic earthquake, you first need to understand what Somaliland actually is, and why its geography makes it one of the most coveted pieces of real estate on the planet. Somaliland declared independence from Somalia in 1991 following the collapse of the Siad Barre regime in a brutal civil war. For over 3 decades, it functioned as a de facto state, holding its own elections, issuing its own currency, running its own courts, maintaining its own national army and coast guard, while the rest of Somalia descended into warlordism, humanitarian catastrophe, and the kind of failed state anarchy that required an international intervention that peaked with the Black Hawk Down incident in Mogadishu in 1993. Somaliland, by contrast, kept its territory relatively secure. It built institutions. It held multiple peaceful transfers of power. By any functional measure, it behaved like a state. But the international community...
But mind you, or remind you, that Somali, like he said, Mogadishu, Black Hawk Down, this is a country that whooped America's ass. Whooped America's ass. Slaughtered America. American servicemen and women lost their lives when they were warned not to go in there. So America should have a bigger problem with Israel recognizing Somaliland as a foreign state, as a foreign country. As a sovereign country. Why is Israel able to deal with the enemies of America in a comfortable way?
Bound by the African Union's commitment to colonial-era borders and the principle of territorial integrity, refused to grant it formal recognition. For 34 years, Somaliland existed in a kind of sovereign limbo, real enough to govern itself, invisible enough to be exploited by everyone around it. And exploited it was, because what Somaliland possesses, in geographic terms, is extraordinary. Its coastline sits directly on the Gulf of Aden, overlooking the Bab al-Mandeb Strait, one of the most critical maritime choke points on Earth. Approximately 12% of global trade...
Now, I know you know what that sounds like. And if you don't, let me help you fill it in. Iran, the Strait of Hormuz, and then Israel already has its sights set on Turkey. And what does Turkey have? A body of water that runs through it, that they charge people a toll, oil and goods flow through it. So what does Israel do? Israel goes to a country that got on America's tall can, whooped his ass, and said, we gonna recognize you as a sovereign country. Where they do that at? If that's not backstabbing and backdooring, I don't know what is. And yet we are finding ourselves fighting a war on their behalf, on the behalf of the same government that recognized Somaliland, who knows is a bitter rival of America. We're playing chess while we're playing checkers while they're playing chess. How fair is that? But if you don't see it, let me make the connection further. These bodies of water move hundreds of millions of billions of dollars daily. Daily. Why does Israel trip on Egypt? The Greater Israel Project, from sea to sea, from Nile to the Euphrates River. Why are they trying to take these bodies of water? Why are they trying to control this? This ain't, now that this is going on in Africa, we don't want to be the bad guy. We want to come in and recognize you guys. But you don't have nothing, so we're going to control your government and your country until you're able to get back online, which will be never, because we're going to control it. Stop playing.
Flows through this strait, connecting the Red Sea to the Indian Ocean and linking the Mediterranean to Asia. Every container ship, every oil tanker, every cargo vessel moving between Europe and Asia passes through this narrow corridor. Europe and Asia passes through this.
Now just think about Asia and Europe. The oil, the grain, the fruits, the artifacts, everything that is flowing, the energy, the oil, everything that is flowing through these straits or through these bodies of water that is going around the world. That is millions of dollars. Look what they're trying to do to Iran with the Strait of Hormuz. America wants to control it. They want to control it. And you would be a fool if you don't think America is going to start charging people to go through that toll, to go through that body of water. Put the pieces together for yourself. Just sit back and ask yourself, why would Israel recognize Somaliland when Israel is an ally of America and Somaliland whooped the shit out of America? Why? That don't sound like fair play.
Narrow corridor. Whoever controls the ports and military positions along this coastline has a hand on the jugular of global commerce. Berbera, Somaliland's main deepwater port, sits precisely on that choke point. It has a long runway airfield suitable for military operations. It has a strategic position that makes it ideal for maritime surveillance, counterterrorism operations, logistics hubs, and intelligence gathering. The United Arab Emirates recognized this strategic value years before Israel did. DP World, the UAE's state-linked port operator, one of the largest in the world, invested hundreds of millions of dollars in expanding Berbera's port infrastructure. The UAE used Berbera as a key...
Jose Perez, I really don't understand what you're saying. You said, no, you don't understand. Once the oil is to maximum capacity in the tankers or that land, that they have to shut down. If they shut down, it is catastrophic. You cannot bring those wells back. I guess what you're trying to say, that those tankers are carrying a lot of oil from around that land, and if that was to be shut down, that body of water was to be shut down, it'd be catastrophic. Yes. If that's what you're saying, yes. If just the Strait of Hormuz controls 20% of the world's oil flowing through there. You shut that down. Look at the prices that we are paying around the world for common goods and oil and gas right now. Now, just imagine if these people had control of the Strait of Hormuz, the body of water next to the Somaliland, and then they went and took out Turkey and took over that body of water. All these bodies of water, and then go to Egypt and take over the Nile and the Suez Canal, right? All these bodies of water equal money. It's not like these bodies of water are just there and they just want them. These bodies of water equal hundreds of billions of dollars annually, into the trillions. So just imagine if one entity or two entities control them all. What would that mean? It would be catastrophic upon those that don't fit their agenda, those that don't preach their agenda, those that don't preach their narrative. They would have a chokehold on the world. Therefore, if you don't do what we say to do, you ain't gonna get this food.
Hub for its regional logistics and military projection networks. It built the port up, built the road connecting it to Ethiopia, and built itself a forward position on the Gulf of Aden that served its interests in East African commerce, its competition with Saudi Arabia for Red Sea dominance, and its broader vision of itself as the Arab world's maritime and logistics superpower. And then Israel arrived. The Washington Institute has documented that initial Israeli-Somaliland discussions began quietly 4 years before the recognition announcement, well before the Houthi crisis elevated the Red Sea to the top of it.
Well before the Houthi crisis. Well before they had any type of Houthi crisis going on in that region. Israel was already having talks in recognizing Somaliland as a sovereign nation. This is before the chaos was there. Now, if you follow the war report on my channel, you will see that France, the United Nations, and NATO have just been exposed of carrying out secret operations of insurgents, terrorists, and Islamic fascist regimes in that area. They've just been exposed, names and everything, phone calls, and it's been exposed that they funded these insurgents in order to have a reason to continuously be over there in that region. So 4 years before the Houthis ever even come out, Israel is already talking about recognizing Somaliland as a sovereign nation. Then the Houthis come out. It sounds like I read this scheme in another book. Afghanistan, Burkina Faso, Iraq. You create a diversion in order to always be able to say, look, this is the reason why we're here. This is why France can't say that now in Burkina Faso's Africa, Niger, or Mali. Why? Because they're not there. So now they're creating insurgents from outside the controlled areas. Not the main group of people. Not the real, and I'm not going to say the real civilians, but yes, the real civilians. These are people that are coming out from other areas trying to come in. And they are being funded. These are Africans, but they're having Western weapons. So the Houthis, another group that's been exposed, that's been getting funded by the UN and NGOs and France secret operations. These are things that are well documented, well throughout the media. It's not like I'm bringing them up, but I'm placing them in a row. Getting the ducks in a row so you can see what's going on. A lot of people like to talk about the New World Order being formed. Just imagine if they controlled these bodies of water. That's what I'm getting at. If they control these bodies of water, they control who eat and who don't. And if you allow these people to control that, you can't allow them to have that control in hopes that they will never do it. And it's for sure you can't believe the government of Israel because they break every treaty, ceasefire, and anything written down in agreement to have peace. So you definitely can't sit back and just say, oh yeah, I'm gonna trust them. You can't do that. So what do? Your better senses say we can't let them have this much power in this region because they've been doing naughty things. They haven't been acting accordingly and morally. But let's continue on.
Every security agenda in the world. But it was the acceleration of those negotiations through 2025, driven by the Houthi attacks on Red Sea shipping that had been terrorizing global commerce since late 2023, that pushed Netanyahu toward formal recognition. Israel's strategic logic was not
that pushed Netanyahu to formal recognition. Before Netanyahu was in the picture, there was no Houthis tripping. The professor just clarified that. He just clarified that. So now in 2023, the Houthis are tripping. Where did they get the weapons on the fire on ships in the Red Sea? So now Somali guy ain't gonna reach out, hey, we need help over here. Who's gonna come to the rescue? Israel. Israel is the one trying to become the big dominant player in that region. And they're doing it by manipulation and sabotage and subterfuge. So when Somaliland says, hey, I need help over here, who is supposed to come? The one that is considered, air quote, the big dog in the region. But how can I come when you have no civil insurgents, when you have no civil complaints that's turning into civil degradation? I have to create that nuisance in order for me to exert my dominance in the region, in order for me to get you to believe in my protection. Why did all these groups just mysteriously start popping up all over the region? Terrorist groups, terrorist groups, terrorist groups, terrorist groups. But when you read the Quran, it says that suicide is against the religion of Islam. But then you find people getting caught, the head of the ISIS, and it comes out that he's actually a Mossad agent. He's Jewish from the Zionist regime. And I've been saying for years that the Zionist regime are the only ones that can grow a beard and say that they're Arab, and the only ones that can cut it off and say that they're European. They have the chameleon over there. How come these heads of these terrorist organizations are never really killed? Oh, but you'll say, oh, Bin Laden's been killed. Prove it. Mawari's been killed. Prove it. And then you come to find out that Benjamin Netanyahu actually helped create Hamas and funded them. And Qatar came out and exposed the payments that they were receiving from Israel and giving to Hamas. They were the go-between. So go figure. Who's creating this madness? Who created the Houthis? I'm not saying the Houthis were never there, but who gave them the arms in order to feed their disgruntled beliefs?
Subtle. It needed a partner on the Red Sea coast to monitor Houthi activity, to provide potential operational staging for counter-Houthi operations, and to give Israeli forces and intelligence services a forward position in a region that the Houthi threat had made existentially relevant to Israeli security. Somaliland's president had publicly offered the United States military basing rights at Berbera and exclusive access to critical minerals, including lithium and coltan, in exchange for formal recognition. He had said in a July 2025 interview that the path to recognition lies in cooperating with the world on security, trade, counterterrorism, piracy, and smuggling. Israel and Somaliland signed the recognition deal on December 26th. Netanyahu pledged full diplomatic relations, the exchange of ambassadors and embassies, and cooperation in agriculture, economic development, and security. The Israeli Institute for National Security Studies had actually warned in a paper published just weeks before the recognition that Israel had compelling reasons to refrain from becoming the first state to formally recognize Somaliland, specifically because of the regional backlash that would follow. The paper recommended developing ties to a level just below formal recognition, building strong security and economic associations without the diplomatic declaration that would trigger Arab condemnation. Netanyahu did not follow that advice. He went for full recognition. And the backlash was immediate, total, and orchestrated by Riyadh, with a precision that suggested Saudi Arabia had been preparing for exactly this moment. Saudi Arabia responded at once. Riyadh leveraged its influence to mobilize a region-wide censure of the Israeli move. The Arab League condemned it. The African Union condemned it. The Gulf Cooperation Council condemned it. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation, mobilized directly by Riyadh, issued a communique describing Israel's recognition of Somaliland as a direct threat to the peace and security of the Horn of Africa and the Red Sea region. The foreign ministers of Somalia, Egypt, Turkey, and Djibouti issued a joint statement of total rejection, stressing their full support for the unity, sovereignty, and territorial integrity of Somalia. Saudi Arabia did not simply react diplomatically, it moved. Within days of Israel's announcement, Saudi Arabia was advancing talks with Mogadishu to form a direct military partnership. On February 9th, 2026, a matter of weeks after the Israeli recognition, Saudi Arabia and Somalia signed a memorandum of understanding on military cooperation. The Gulf International Forum described this as a calculated effort to reshape the Red Sea security order by ending Emirati influence, countering Iranian-aligned threats, and safeguarding the maritime and economic foundations of Vision 2030. Somalia, the forum noted, is no longer a peripheral concern for Riyadh. It has become a key arena where Gulf rivalry, maritime insecurity, and Saudi ambitions converge. But to understand just how brilliantly calculated Saudi Arabia's Somalia play actually is, you need to understand what the UAE stood to lose, and how the Israeli recognition of Somaliland exposed a fault line between Riyadh and Abu Dhabi that Saudi Arabia immediately exploited to devastating effect. The UAE had built its Somaliland position over years. DP World's investment in Berbera was not charity. It was a strategic asset, a deepwater port on the Gulf of Aden that gave Abu Dhabi forward positioning in the Red Sea, a logistics hub that connected to Ethiopia, and a foothold in East Africa that served the UAE's long-term vision of itself as the dominant maritime and commercial power of the wider Arab-African corridor. The UAE had done the same thing across the East African coastline, acquiring port concessions in Eritrea, Djibouti, and Mozambique as part of a network of maritime footholds that give Abu Dhabi reach far beyond the Gulf. This network is the physical expression of the UAE's strategic worldview, that the future of Gulf power lies not just in oil wealth, but in controlling the ports, logistics routes, and commercial arteries that connect the world. Now, here is the critical detail that most observers missed, and that made Israel's recognition of Somaliland so geopolitically explosive for the Saudi-UAE relationship. The UAE had not officially recognized Somaliland's independence. It had invested in Berbera, built the port, cultivated deep relationships with Somaliland's leadership, but it had maintained formal ambiguity about sovereignty, refusing to explicitly back Somaliland's independence claim in order to avoid the diplomatic costs of defying the African Union and the broader international consensus on territorial integrity. When Israel formally recognized Somaliland, the Arab Center DC reported that the UAE refused to sign the joint Arab League OIC statement condemning Israel's recognition. Every other Arab state signed. The UAE did not. The Arab Center DC noted that the UAE's position may have contributed to Israel's decision to go ahead with recognition, essentially suggesting that Abu Dhabi had given at minimum tacit encouragement to Tel Aviv's move. That refusal to condemn Israel's recognition of Somaliland in the context of a moment when Saudi Arabia was mobilizing the entire Arab and Islamic world to condemn it was read in Riyadh as confirmation of something MBS had long suspected, that the UAE and Israel were operating as a coordinated strategic axis in the Horn of Africa, pursuing...
Now, this is my thing. And I'm going off of history, religion, when I say this. If Muslims and Jews, and especially those that call themselves Jews, the Zionist regime, right? If they know that they don't like each other, like for real, Israel and all these Arab states know they don't like each other, why would they work with each other? If you know Israel is backed by America, and you see what Israel does to Muslim countries one after another, and now you have full bulletproof facts and proof of what Israel is capable of doing. Look at Gaza. Look at Palestine. And you will see. Look what they're doing to Iran right now. And threats of doing the same thing to Turkey. What they're doing to Lebanon. So you gotta ask yourself, at what point do these Muslim Arab countries say, you know what? We're not even messing with you. Because when Israel gets in, what do you think they're gonna do? They want dominance. They want power and recognition. They want to control. I'm not gonna stop saying it. You have to stop Israel where they are right now, because if you don't, they are gonna put a chokehold on the world. They are already trying to put a chokehold on America through blackmail. They're already holding America by its tie and choking America out every time America doesn't do something that they want to do. But when they want to do something and it's against America, they're able to do it with no backlash. Something is not right here.
Shared goals that directly threatened Saudi interests. The Somali government reached the same conclusion and acted on it with consequences that immediately devastated years of Emirati investment. On January 12, 2026, Somalia's cabinet announced the cancellation of all defense, security, and port operations agreements with the UAE. Somalia's defense minister, Ahmed Mualim Fiki, stated publicly that the decision was based on evidence that the UAE was undermining the sovereignty, national unity, and political independence of the Republic of Somalia. Somalia also imposed a prohibition on military and cargo aircraft owned or leased by the UAE from using Somali airspace. The trigger for the final break was a specific incident. The UAE had allegedly allowed Idris al-Zubaydi, the leader of Yemen's Southern Transitional Council, a separatist figure who was at that very moment presiding over the UAE-backed SDC's military offensive in southern Yemen, to transit through Somali territory without Mogadishu's knowledge or approval. Zubaydi reportedly fled Aden to Somaliland and then boarded a UAE-linked flight to Mogadishu and on to Abu Dhabi. To the Somali government, the unauthorized transit of the leader of a UAE-backed secessionist movement through their airspace was not a coincidence. It was evidence that the UAE was treating their territory as its own private logistics corridor, and doing so in the service of a separatist network that the UAE was simultaneously running in Yemen and enabling in Somaliland. The UAE began evacuating personnel from Berbera port. Reports from the Horn Review indicated that the UAE started disassembling radar equipment and other hardware in Bosaso port, another key Emirati asset on the Gulf of Aden that had served as a hub for UAE supply operations in the region. The UAE also airlifted personnel and equipment from Mogadishu to Addis Ababa. Personnel and equipment from Mogadishu to Addis Ababa. In a matter of weeks, an Emirati network in the Horn of Africa that had been built over more than a decade, with hundreds of millions of dollars of port investment, military training facilities, security cooperation agreements, and political relationships, had been dismantled and expelled, and Saudi Arabia had replaced it. The speed and comprehensiveness of the Emirati collapse in the Horn of Africa, coinciding with the UAE's simultaneous military withdrawal from Yemen following Saudi airstrikes on Mukalla port, represented a strategic rout of extraordinary magnitude. Two of the UAE's most important theaters of regional influence, Yemen and Somalia, were lost within the same month, and Saudi Arabia was the force that had driven both outcomes. Now, step back for a moment and look at the full strategic picture that Saudi Arabia has assembled, because it is genuinely remarkable in its scope and sophistication. The Horn Review has described what has emerged as a coalition of the status quo, a multilateral front led by Saudi Arabia in strategic coordination with Turkey, Egypt, Eritrea, Sudan's recognized government, Djibouti, Pakistan, and Qatar, operationalized through a series of maritime pacts, military cooperation agreements, and diplomatic coordination mechanisms, all specifically designed to dismantle the expanding influence of what the analysis describes as the UAE-Ethiopia-Israel triangle. Let us unpack what that means in practice. Saudi Arabia has signed a military cooperation memorandum with Somalia. It has mobilized the OIC to condemn Israel's Somaliland recognition in the strongest possible terms. It has strengthened Egypt's position against the UAE's support for Sudan's rapid support forces. Egypt, which deeply distrusts Ethiopia over the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam dispute and the water security of the Nile, has aligned with Saudi Arabia's position in Somalia precisely because Ethiopian access to a Red Sea port via Somaliland or Berbera would give Addis Ababa maritime reach that fundamentally threatens Egyptian strategic interests. Turkey, which has its own military training presence in Somalia, its own naval agreements with Mogadishu, and its own ideological alignment with movements that oppose the UAE's anti-Islamist agenda, has coordinated closely with Riyadh in condemning Israel's recognition and reinforcing Somali sovereignty. The Horn Review has described how Saudi mediation bridged the historical rift between Turkey and Egypt, two countries that have clashed bitterly over Mediterranean exclusive economic zones and over ideological differences tied to Turkish support for the Muslim Brotherhood, enabling indirect Turkish-Egyptian coordination in the Horn of Africa without requiring a formal bilateral alliance between them. That is a diplomatic feat of considerable sophistication. Riyadh brought together countries that normally cannot agree on anything and pointed them in the same direction, against the UAE-Israel-Ethiopia axis operating in the Horn. And MBS used his personal relationship with Donald Trump, cultivated through the $300 billion in agreements signed during Trump's May 2025 Gulf visit, and the landmark designation of Saudi Arabia as a major non-NATO ally during MBS's November 2025 Washington visit to push American policy toward the Saudi position as well. GIS Reports has documented that during MBS's November 2025 visit to Washington, he specifically pushed Sudan and Somalia onto Trump's agenda. The Trump administration has since been expected to devote greater diplomatic effort to ending the Sudanese civil war on terms that align with Saudi preferences, not Emirati ones. Saudi Arabia has successfully used its transactional relationship with the Trump White House to shape American policy in a direction that serves Riyadh's regional interests and directly undermines Abu Dhabi's. The strategic logic behind Saudi Arabia's Somalia play is inseparable from Vision 2030, and this is where the full picture becomes truly coherent. Saudi Arabia's grand economic transformation plan is not just about building entertainment cities and attracting technology companies to Riyadh. At its geographic foundation, Vision 2030 requires Saudi Arabia to secure and control the maritime corridors through which its oil exports, and eventually its diversified non-oil exports, will reach global markets. The Red Sea is not a backdrop to Vision 2030. It is one of its most critical arteries. Saudi Arabia exports approximately 6 to 7 million barrels of oil per day, much of it passing through or near the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden. The Houthi attacks on Red Sea shipping that began in late 2023, and that by 2025 had forced massive rerouting of global shipping lanes at enormous cost to Saudi export economics, demonstrated with...
Now, for them ships to be rerouted, who would that benefit? That, to me, in my assessment, and like I said, the Houthis wasn't there before Bibi Netanyahu got there. Now he's there, and he's trying to establish some shit. You got the Houthis all of a sudden on the Red Sea shooting at tankers. Now the Saudi Arabia gotta reroute all their ships costing them hundreds of millions of dollars into the billions to take a different route. Who would that benefit? Israel. Israel wants that. Israel wants to control that. So if Israel or the Zionist regime gives the Houthis weapons, and this has been proven, they're offsetting everything to stop Arabia from becoming a good power. I mean, becoming a power in the Middle East, a bigger power. They downplay Iran and Turkey like they just these little bitty countries. But now we see what Iran can do. A country that has blockades on it for over 50 years. Stop playing.
Little clarity exactly how vulnerable those arteries are. The Gulf International Forum has noted that Houthi operations in the Red Sea had intensified through 2025, forcing reroutes that increased the cost of Saudi exports and threatened the financial foundations of Vision 2030's diversification programs. If Saudi Arabia cannot guarantee that the maritime approaches to the Red Sea are secured and that no hostile power controls the choke points through which its trade must pass, then every mega project, every diversification initiative, every foreign investment ambition built into Vision 2030 rests on an unstable foundation. This is why Somalia matters so profoundly to MBS. Somalia's federal government controls the coastline of the Gulf of Aden on the southern side of the Bab al-Mandeb approach. A Saudi-aligned, Saudi-supported Somalia, with its defense agreements intact, its territorial integrity defended, and its central government strengthened against both UAE-backed fragmentation and al-Shabaab insurgency, is an essential piece of the maritime security architecture that Arabia needs for Vision 2030 to work. A fragmented Somalia, with Somaliland operating as an independent state, hosting Israeli intelligence facilities, UAE port operations, and potentially American military bases, outside Mogadishu's authority and outside Saudi Arabia's influence, is a direct strategic threat to everything Riyadh is building. This is not sentiment. This is geography. And MBS understands geography with the precision of someone who has staked his entire historical legacy on getting it right. The Horn Review, in its analysis of Saudi Arabia's prospective naval ambitions in Somalia, has reported that Riyadh has been exploring the possibility of securing a naval base at Las Korai, a port in the Sanag region of northern Somalia. A Saudi naval presence at Las Korai would give Riyadh the ability to monitor Houthi activities in the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden directly, support rapid response operations to interrupt Iranian arms smuggling to the Houthis through the Horn of Africa, and establish a permanent Saudi military footprint in the maritime approaches to the Bab al-Mandeb. That would be a transformative development, giving Saudi Arabia direct naval reach into the choke point that it needs to secure for the entire economic future of Vision 2030. It would also place Saudi military assets precisely in the maritime space that the UAE had hoped to dominate through its Berbera investments and that Israel had hoped to access through its Somaliland recognition deal. The UAE-Israel-Ethiopia triangle that Saudi Arabia is now systematically dismantling represents something more than just three countries with overlapping interests. It represents a specific vision of what the Horn of Africa's geopolitical future should look like, one built on fragmented transactional relationships with sub-state actors like Somaliland and the Southern Transitional Council, rather than on the formal sovereignty of recognized central governments. The UAE has consistently pursued this model across multiple theaters.
I want to make something clear also. When he was talking about Iran delivering weapons to the Houthis, I still stand on the Houthis were not there before Benjamin Netanyahu. And this is the thing. Every country has, like I said, disgruntled employees, civil complaints that turn into civil conflict, civil degradation. But who started giving these people weapons? Who started it? Who brought this evil to that area? And we have seen time and time again that these people bring evil to where sometimes it gets out of control. Not saying that they don't control it. It's just, all right, we know what they're going to do. Just go ahead and let them do it then.
In Yemen, it backed the STC, a secessionist force that sought to split the country, giving the UAE control over southern ports without the complications of dealing with a unified Yemeni government that answered to Riyadh. In Sudan, it backed the RSF, a paramilitary force that challenged the authority of the central government, giving the UAE leverage over political outcomes without having to work through legitimate state institutions. In Somalia, it invested in Berbera, building infrastructure in a territory that explicitly rejected the authority of the federal government in Mogadishu, giving Abu Dhabi port access without the diplomatic cost of recognizing Somaliland's independence while simultaneously accumulating the practical benefits of its fragmentation from Somalia. This pattern, what one analyst has called a strategy of calculated fragmentation rather than true partnership, is the UAE's playbook for East African influence. And it is precisely this playbook that Saudi Arabia has now committed to defeating. Riyadh's countermodel is the explicit defense of state sovereignty and territorial integrity. Saudi Arabia defends the recognized Yemeni government. It defends Mogadishu's sovereignty over Somaliland. It backs the Sudanese armed forces as the legitimate authority in Khartoum. In every case where the UAE has backed a sub-state actor or secessionist movement, Saudi Arabia has taken the opposite position, championing the central government, the recognized sovereign authority, the internationally acknowledged state. This is not idealism, it is strategy. Because recognized central governments are far easier for Riyadh to cultivate, influence, and align with Saudi interests than fragmented sub-state entities that the UAE has already captured. Saudi Arabia wins by strengthening the institutions the UAE is trying to undermine. Israel's role in this picture adds a layer of complexity that is specific to the current moment in Middle Eastern politics, and that goes directly to the heart of what separates Saudi and Emirati strategic visions. The UAE normalized relations with Israel in September 2020 through the Abraham Accords, becoming the first Gulf state alongside Bahrain to do so since Jordan in 1994. That normalization has produced genuine and deep strategic cooperation between Abu Dhabi and Tel Aviv in technology, intelligence sharing, defense, and now, as the Somaliland episode demonstrates, in Horn of Africa, geopolitics. The UAE's willingness to align with Israeli strategic interests in Somaliland, whether through active encouragement of Israel's recognition or through its refusal to condemn it, reflects the depth of that partnership and the degree to which Abu Dhabi now considers Israeli interests aligned with its own in the competition for Red Sea and East African influence. Saudi Arabia has a fundamentally different relationship with Israel. MBS has repeatedly stated that Saudi Arabia will normalize with Israel only on the condition of meaningful, tangible progress toward a Palestinian state. He has publicly called Israeli actions in Gaza genocide. He has refused to join the Abraham Accords despite enormous American pressure to do so, including during the Trump administration's intensive diplomatic engagement of 2025. Saudi Arabia's position on Israel is both a genuine moral and political stance and a strategic asset. It allows Riyadh to position itself as the defender of the Palestinian cause within the Arab and Islamic world, a positioning that is essential to the religious legitimacy that Saudi Arabia derives from its custodianship of Mecca and Medina. When Israel recognized Somaliland and when the UAE refused to condemn that recognition, Saudi Arabia was able to present itself to the entire Arab and African world as the only major Gulf power that takes Palestinian solidarity and Islamic solidarity seriously. That positioning cost Saudi Arabia nothing and gave it enormous moral authority with the 55 member states of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, with the African Union's 55 member states, and with the broad coalition of countries that joined Riyadh's condemnation of Israel's move. The counter-alliance that Saudi Arabia assembled in response to the Israeli Somaliland recognition, drawing in Turkey, Egypt, Pakistan, Qatar, Djibouti, Eritrea, and Somalia itself, is not merely a response to a single diplomatic incident. It is the architecture of a new Red Sea security order, one centered on Saudi Arabia rather than on the UAE-Israel-Ethiopia triangle that had been quietly building its own alternative framework. The Horn Review has described Saudi Arabia as having masterfully synchronized Turkey's military projection, Egypt's diplomatic weight, and the fortified littoral positions of Eritrea, Djibouti, and Somalia into a singular defensive front. That is a remarkable coalition, spanning the entire eastern coastline of Africa from Egypt's Red Sea coast down through Eritrea, Djibouti, and Somalia, coordinated from Riyadh, and aligned against an alternative axis that Israel's Somaliland recognition had brought into the open. It is important, at this point, to be honest about what Saudi Arabia's Somalia policy actually is at its core, because framing it purely as noble defense of sovereignty and territorial integrity would be incomplete. The Gulf International Forum's Dr. John Calabresi, one of the most rigorous analysts of this situation, has described Riyadh's Somalia strategy as a calculated effort to reshape the Red Sea security order by ending Emirati influence, countering Iranian-aligned threats, and safeguarding the maritime and economic foundations of Vision 2030. It is calculated and self-serving, not altruistic. The Horn Review has noted directly that Saudi Arabia does not act as a benevolent stabilizer. It is a self-serving actor focused on maintaining influence in federal structures to strengthen its own position. Somalia's defense minister pleaded for Riyadh to intervene militarily against Somaliland's secessionist ambitions, not because Somalia and Saudi Arabia share deep bonds of brotherhood, but because both governments calculated that a Saudi-Somali alignment against the UAE-Israel-Somaliland axis served their respective interests. That is the reality of geopolitics in the Horn of Africa today, a theater in which every external actor, Saudi Arabia included, is pursuing its own interests through the language of sovereignty, stability, and legitimate governance. What makes this moment genuinely historic, however, is not just the immediate tactical outcomes. The UAE's retreat from Somalia, the military cooperation agreement between Riyadh and Mogadishu, the coalition that Saudi Arabia assembled in a matter of weeks. What makes it historic is what it reveals about the trajectory of power in the Red Sea and East Africa over the coming decade. Saudi Arabia has demonstrated in rapid succession across Yemen and Somalia that it has the capacity, the will, and the diplomatic sophistication to confront Emirati influence wherever it conflicts with Saudi strategic interests, and to win those confrontations decisively. It has demonstrated that its relationship with Washington, carefully cultivated through hundreds of billions of dollars in investment deals and defense agreements, can be leveraged to shape American foreign policy in specific regional theaters in ways that serve Saudi preferences. It has demonstrated that it can build multilateral coalitions, bringing together Turkey, Egypt, Qatar, Pakistan, Djibouti, Eritrea, and Somalia around shared positions that give Saudi Arabia the kind of institutional heft and collective legitimacy that no single bilateral relationship can provide. And it has done all of this through what GIS Reports has called deliberate, pragmatic, sovereignty-oriented statecraft. The same approach that MBS has been refining ever since Saudi Arabia's costly and ultimately unsuccessful military campaign in Yemen reminded him that the blunt instrument of military force has real limitations and that economic leverage, coalition building, and strategic patience can achieve outcomes that bombs cannot. The Saudi Arabia that is operating in the Horn of Africa in 2026 is different from the Saudi Arabia that launched Operation Decisive Storm in 2015 with the expectation of a quick, decisive victory over the Houthis. It is more sophisticated, more patient, more willing to play a long game, more willing to use its economic weight, its religious authority, its diplomatic relationships, and its personal connection to the American president as instruments of statecraft rather than relying primarily on military power. The implications for the broader Middle East map are significant. Every country in the Horn of Africa is now being drawn into the orbit of this Gulf rivalry, forced to choose between the Saudi-led coalition defending state sovereignty and territorial integrity on one side, and the UAE, Israel, Ethiopia axis on the other. For most of these countries, the choice is not difficult. The African Union and Arab League positions are clear. Saudi Arabia's coalition represents the international consensus. The UAE-Israel position is the outlier. That means the UAE and Israel are going to find it increasingly difficult to sustain their Horn of Africa ambitions against a Saudi-assembled coalition that has the numbers, the institutional backing, and the moral framing on its side. For Israel specifically, the Somaliland recognition may prove to have been a tactical win that created a strategic problem. Netanyahu secured a foothold in the Red Sea region and a potential future intelligence and security position near the Bab al-Mandab. But he also triggered a Saudi-led coalition response that has hardened positions across the Arab and African worlds in ways that make any broader Israeli normalization project in the Muslim world significantly more complicated. Every Arab leader who signed the OIC condemnation, every African Union member state that joined the censure, every Somali street protester who marched against Israeli recognition, they are all part of a political landscape that Saudi Arabia has shaped, and that makes the regional environment Israel was hoping to reshape through Somaliland more resistant, not more receptive, to Israeli influence. The geography of the Horn of Africa has always been contested. The Bab al-Mandab has been a strategic prize for powers ranging from the Ottoman Empire to British colonialism to Cold War superpowers. What is new is that the contest for this geography is now being run by Gulf powers, by Saudi Arabia and the UAE, two countries that share the same GCC membership, the same religion, the same language, and until recently, what appeared to be the same strategic vision. The fact that these two countries are now fighting proxy and diplomatic battles from Yemen's shattered coastline to the Horn of Africa reveals something profound about where the Arab world actually is right now. not united by any common project, not aligned by any shared vision, but divided by competing ambitions for dominance in the post-oil era, ambitions that are being played out across some of the world's most fragile states at enormous cost to the people who actually live there.
I hope y'all was paying attention, man, and seeing the war from a different lens. And this is why I always been saying it's the reason why NATO and France is not involved in the Iran-Israel war. They have their own thing going on. You know, I don't see Saudi Arabia as becoming a legitimate major power with credible backing to countries in East Africa and in the region. Because at the same time they're losing their influence. They're losing their credibility. Why? Because a lot of these states over there, a lot of these countries over there are Muslim countries. And a lot of the African countries are Sunni Muslim. You feel me? And Muslims altogether don't take too well of the Muslims doing business with Jews. And Saudi Arabia is a major country, a major power in the Middle East that has influence, major influence, but also it's been working and dealing with the Jews and the Israeli government, who a lot of countries over there perceive as a threat and as a continuous enemy. And this is not the first time that the Jews have been kicked out of Israel. The Jews have been kicked out of East Africa. You could go back to the times of Idi Amin. Idi Amin was even cool with the Jewish government, Golda Meir. And he was recorded as saying that he was only cool with her because when he would go to Israel, he would go to Jerusalem, she would give him good entertainment. But he said that they were liars. They don't respect nothing. And he kicked them out. And then, we saw what happened to his regime. Also, I like to point out that Arabia, as being a major power in the Middle East, has to show its power and its credible backing now. Why? Because a lot of people in NATO, a lot of countries in NATO that was looking to America for credible backing, legitimacy, recognition from the world stage. A lot of those countries have been tricked into signing deals with America and not receiving what they're supposed to receive in return. And a lot of these countries are seeing that. And a lot of these other bigger countries are seeing that as well. But what's the difference is a lot of these little countries see now, we don't need these bigger countries to back us. Let us get the technology and we can do it ourselves. But then this comes that big power dominance bully game. This is when they showing the power, but also they showing you the power of what can happen to you as well. That's the psychological warfare that these big powers play on. Let us back you, But if you get out of line, you see what we did to your enemy, we'll do the same thing. And mind you, East Africa is nothing like West Africa. And I have said on the war report, and I have said the unseen war that is going on, that they don't want you to see that's going on in West Africa. Burkina Faso taking its gold mines back, kicking France out, kicking the Australians out, kicking the Israeli government out, and building their own country. Fine, you want to put blockades on us? Cool. But everything we find on our soil is going to stay here first. That's NATO. That's France. That's the reason, like I said before, time and time again, that is the reason why NATO, the countries of NATO and France can't enter the Iran-Israel war, because they will be bleeding for money. They have no longer any access to the gold of Burkina Faso. France already took all of its gold out of American vaults. Took all of its gold out of America. Why? Because they have no more gold coming in from Burkina Faso. They need their gold. That gold is their leverage in order to keep dancing on the world stage. I got the money. I got a right to be here. But what is not being seen is France is bleeding. America is bleeding. Israel is bleeding. Saudi Arabia is bleeding. These are countries, superpowers that have been dominant factors on the world stage for decades and centuries. And they have not brought true sovereignty, freedom, justice, and equality to any of the colonized states that they colonized. And people are waking up to that. West Africa is waking up to that. West Africa is not dealing with anybody in Africa that is making deals with France, Israel, or America. They're not doing it. So that is the difference between West Africa and East Africa. West Africa is about true sovereignty. We'll build it ourselves. East Africa, well, we might be up for grabs. And this is the format that Saudi Arabia is trying to build on. That's why they're going after countries that are actually already built up and are recognized by the world stage. Here you go, let us throw some money. You keep running your state. Let us get some money with you. We build it, you just slide us something too. See, I come from the dope game. And if you got all the dope, it may be a nigga that's buying from you on the cheap end, but he over here putting a little spin on it. So now he might be buying 4 from you, but he got an 8. So he really looked like the man. He trying to wiggle in. So what Saudi Arabia is doing is saying, you know what? You want to be the man. You want to run your thing. No problem. Get it from us. Keep doing your thing. I'm going to sit in the shadows. I ain't trying to be involved in nothing you just got going on. Bring me the chip. I got it for you. But how can I be trusted when I've already been cool with when I've been cool with working with the enemy? How much do I have in what I'm building with the people that I'm building with? How much do they trust me? Not a long way. In these smaller countries and entities are seeing that they could do it by themselves. Me personally, my assessment is America and Israel is gonna have to strike a deal that is favorable for Iran. And through that deal, Iran is gonna be recognized on the global stage. And when that happens, that's when a lot of people around there are gonna see, and they're gonna get backed by Iran. They're gonna get backed by Russia. China ain't gonna be in the deal. Why? Because people don't trust China as well. China about the money. You see how China keep threatening, oh, we'll snatch economical support from you, Iran? Nigga, Iran, like, nigga, we ain't tripping. We'll get that economical support from Russia. Because everybody buying they oil. It may be at discount, but they making hundreds of millions a day. And our missiles only costing thousands. Hey, y'all know what it is. Y'all know who it is, man. It's your boy Pharaoh the God, always on the job. I got 5. Let's talk. And as always, it's real talk, raw talk. And y'all know we keep it fair like a California bear. We ain't a California raisin, so we ain't doing no hating. Gary, I see you in the comments, man. Shout out to Gary for indulging in the comments, man, with the American flag. I'm all for America. I'm not a hater of America. I'm American to the bone. I have a right to criticize my government on a political stance about its foreign affairs. And if you think that's un-American, whoop-de-doo. Whoop-de-doo. I think what's best for these little countries like Somalia, Eritrea, Djibouti, Egypt, I think they don't need backing from nobody else. I think they just need to develop what they have already and stop dealing with people that already close the door in your face or open the door for the enemy to walk in on you while you had your head down eating. Pause. Sometimes it is best just to do it yourself when you have the means. The best outcome can make you feel good when it's done with your own hands. Americans felt good, and this is where the racist pride for Americans came from when we had the steel mills, when we had the automobile warehouses and plants. When we was making cars, Americans felt prideful in what they was doing. When the trash man was out here picking up trash, they were prideful. That's where that American pride racist thing came from, especially in America. Why? Because we are prideful in what we built. We ain't building shit no more. We taking shit. And we buying shit from overseas. China's the warehouse, we buying everything from China. You see what China did? You can't trust China. Now that China had to take the COVID shit, Trump talking shit about China. So what did China do? China came out and said, oh, them handbags y'all paying $50,000 for, we make them for $11 over here. And America buys them and sells them to y'all for $50,000. But now China and America is cool again. I don't see these smaller nations really running behind these bigger mega power players anymore. I don't. And I think that's the good thing. And I think that people shouldn't take that as a scary thing. Oh, the world is going to be full of terrorists. No. Ask yourself, how much of this terrorist shit do you really believe? And if you don't believe it, go look it up. These terrorist groups that are in Africa and all these other ISIS, They are being ran by Mossad agents. Literally Jewish Israeli military officials. You can't make this shit up. It's documented. As we just seen right here, before Benjamin Netanyahu even got into play, there was such thing as Houthis. And you may say, oh, well, Pharaoh, the Iranian government supports the Houthis, and who started this entity to come out in order to commit violence on a major scale? Also, it's the war between Israel and Iran is so intense because they know each other. They was working with each other for years. So what do? Oh, that's my enemy fucking with them. They ain't got power over there no more. Hey, y'all send some people over there, man. Tell them we got they back, man. They don't fuck with Israel no more. That's how it go. But it doesn't stop the violence that Israel already created. You think it's cool because the Iranians is supplying them with guns and shit now? No. That is a civil conflict between Somalia that they need to digest and come to some type of compromisation over. Before Benjamin Netanyahu, Somaliland and Somalia was right next to each other. They was getting along cool. Had ports. Saudi Arabia was, you feel me, helping them get that chip. Even though the UAE, even though they didn't recognize them as some big old sovereign state, they were still helping them get money. They were still helping them come. They were still coming through in the fourth quarter. But now look, when Benjamin Netanyahu comes into the play, now all that is destroyed. All that is destroyed. Now Somaliland is like the little child that got put in the corner on timeout indefinitely. You don't think, like me, I think that those that advised or those that still advise Benjamin Netanyahu, that was a part of the trickery plan. Go over there, recognize them, and get everybody to turn against them. That's a war Israel ain't even have to fight. Now they over there still causing mad records. Hey, look, man, world, that's why we gotta go to the Horn of Africa. Look how much fighting and bloodshed is being done over there. Saudi Arabia ain't doing nothing about it. Let's go over there. That's how I look at it. I just look at shit different. I really do. Feel free to indulge in the comment section, man. Hit that comments, man. Don't be scared. Ask me anything. State how you feel. And keep it, just keep it on the board. I got 5. Let's talk, man. Don't be shy. Say hi. It don't cost you much to touch. Hit that like button. It don't cost you nothing. But Israel is trying to exert its power and show that it can be a regional major player in controlling East Africa, Arabia, whatever it is. But while they're trying to show their dominance and controlling, they're committing genocide. They're depleting ancient cities that been around before the state of Israel was around. This is the major problem that people sees. And who's backing them? America. And you're not saying nothing? You're not condemning them on the world stage? You're not withholding the aid and billions of dollars that you give to them every year? these smaller countries are looking at America and say, well, you said you got us, but you letting this dude run around crazy. What is really going on? Hey, shout out to Fossey. He says, I'm from Somaliland. I want to know. I wasn't waiting and listen about what is going on here. I'm saying we just ran the content. You may have to run it back. But what was going on is that Israel, I'm pretty sure you probably remember Israel recognizing Somaliland as a sovereign state, and then Arabia coming in, pulling its resources from over there, not recognizing it, signing deals with Somalia, the UAE taking all personnel and port workers out of Somaliland, and then from there it caused a whole bunch of dysfunction over there. And I believe that this was a plot by Benjamin Netanyahu in order to go over there and recognize Somaliland as a sovereign state, knowing everybody would be against it, and therefore, instead of clashing on Israel, they would clash on Somaliland and tear Somaliland up, and everybody would forget about what Israel just did and went over there. That's what I was saying. I believe that, that this, my assessment, I mean, it's documented, but I don't know who's going to believe it. But shout out to the people in Somaliland, man. I know it's hard, and I was saying that even though, I think that people should stay out of certain politics when it comes to homeland business. And what I mean by homeland business, Somaliland and Somalia right next door to each other. They was living cool. Whatever happened. And the UAE came in, Saudi Arabia came in. Somaliland was looking real prosperous, looking good on a lot of scales until Benjamin Netanyahu showed up. That's when everything started to fall apart for Somaliland. And I think that his advisors wanted that to happen, like I said, in order to tell the world stage, hey, look, it's fighting going on over there in the Horn of Africa. We need to go over there. We were the ones that said that we wanted to recognize Somaliland as a sovereign nation. So since we said that, let us go over there and do that. Let us go take care of it. And I don't believe that their recognition of Somaliland sovereignty as a nation is any good. Is any good because the UAE was dealing in trade and business on a global scale with Somaliland without recognizing them as a sovereign nation. And this is my thing. What does it really matter if you recognize me as a sovereign nation or not? Let me build up my arsenal. Let me get my defense. And let me do my thing. You come over here fucking with me, you gonna fuck around and find out. I think the way the world was constructed in favor of those that made the laws at that time. You have to be a recognized sovereign nation. No, I don't. Come over here and fuck around and find out. And I'll show you what a nation does. So I just think that people coming in and manipulating that air quote sovereignty and all that comes with that, I think it's a farce. I think it's a real farce. I think it's a manipulation for their agenda. I think that is something Somalia and Somaliland needs to figure out. And I think everybody needs to get their nose out that business. That is what civil conflict looks like. Until you come to some type of compromisation, look, man, we're still Somali. Anybody fuck with you, they fuck with us. Y'all do y'all thing, we gonna do our thing. But it's peace between us. We recognize you, all that. Boom. You get your recognition of sovereignty from Somalia. That's political compromisation. So now the world knows if you fuck with Somaliland, you fuck with Somalia. Look, man, we just gonna let them do their thing. We already get money with them. But I just think it's conflict created in order to create control. That's my thing. That's just how I feel about it. Hey, y'all know what it is. Y'all know who it is, man. It's that time again to bring another show to a close, man. I appreciate everybody rocking with me tonight, man. Coming through, indulging in the comments, not being scared, not being shy, saying hi, and knowing that it don't cost much to touch, man, and hitting that like button, man. Please tell a friend to tell a friend to tell another friend to share, like, and subscribe. I am not monetized, nor will I ever be. I get strikes too much, just got a strike last week. And that's just for bringing this honest to God content, you know, and giving my assessment of the situation. No, I've never visited Somaliland or Somalia, but I'm just speaking from a political standpoint. You know, I'm not gonna sit up here and be like, oh yeah, man, you know, I've been there, I know 100% of what's going on. No, I don't. But from a political standpoint, that is something that Somalia and Somaliland needs to reconcile. But the facts are, Benjamin Netanyahu, then came the Houthis. And that's why I played this content, so you can see the creation of conflict for the creation of control. Before 4 years ago, whatever was going on between Somalia and Somaliland, it was working and they were getting money. After Benjamin Netanyahu, you have the Houthis. After the Houthis, you have the Arabs signing deals and bringing ships through the Red Sea. The Houthis get to shooting at the tankers. Now they gotta reroute, costing millions into billions of dollars. And who does that benefit? None other than Israel. This is the reason why we have to box Somaliland. But then, where was Israel when everything started to go down the drain? They were the first to recognize Somaliland as a sovereign nation, but where were they and where are they now? Or are they trying to find some type of compromisation on the world stage for everybody else to get to recognize? No, they left them in the dark, as they always do once things start to happening. And I think that's why these other countries that have been under this pressure from them for years are seeing this. That once things go bad, these countries, these mega power players, leave these countries in the dark because these countries rely on these mega players. And Ibrahim Traore in Burkina Faso is showing what you can do if you do it yourself. There are other mega players out there that are willing to help you. They need to buy things too. Barter system. You give us this, we give you that. And they don't want to control you like these other entities do. And a lot of these people are waking up. And my assessment on Africa, Islam, and well, I'm gonna just say the African political spectrum and the Middle East, so to speak, political spectrum. I think that Africa just needs to deal with Africa and stop worrying about getting help from everybody else. Because a lot of people that are trying to give you that help are just trying to manipulate the situation into their benefit. I was once watching this guy speak, and he said, for years, we grow up and we hear Africa is such a poor country. Africa this, Africa, they show you these begging kids with flies on their face. Africa this. But every country is in Africa getting rich. But Africa's a poor country. He said, you don't go to a poor country to get rich. It's mathematically impossible. If they're poor, they don't have no money to buy nothing. They have nothing to give. But if they have something to give, and these other countries are getting massive wealth and sustaining their economy and being mega players, that's different. They have something to give. They're being manipulated out of it. And that's why I say Africa just needs to be for Africans. I don't see nothing wrong with Burkina Faso taking over their own gold mines. I see nothing wrong with South Africa trying to eradicate the apartheid regime and system and laws. I see nothing wrong with Ghana and the Ivory Coast trying to befriend and get in line, in Tanzania, get in line with the Sahel states. I don't see nothing wrong with it. All these countries that they've been tied to before or looked up to for protection, economical support, they all have been lied to, shitted on, backstabbed, and downright just mistreated. You gone? Give me a second. Please feel free to indulge in the comments though, man. Let me know how you feel. Or, I'm just up right now, so, we can pull up any topic anybody want to talk about, man. Just indulge in the comments. Let me know, man. Roll me a blunt. But also, man, Saudi Arabia, though, also, it's not like they're a big friend of Israel. You know, they do have more of a moral obligation when dealing with Somaliland, Somalia, and certain countries, because a lot of the countries that they deal with are Muslim. A lot of their national religion is Islam, whatever the difference may be. Shia, Sunni, Wahhabi, Mufti, whatever it be, Ansar, they all still approach the same moral outcome. For them, it would be Islam. So, I mean, I've never really seen Saudi Arabia be that much of a bad person, but they have backed the bad people in the past. And that messed it up for them now. It could. I'm not for certain. Because, see, some people could say, we had to. I had to deal with them. I'm here now. The excuses could come and they could be believable. So, it's bad for Saudi Arabia, just as bad as it's for America. And if Iran comes out the victor in this war, America and Israel knows this as well too. If they come out victorious in this war, it gives a shift in power in the Middle East and into Africa, because some of these countries already been having commerce and trade with Iran because of the blockade. So if America loses this war, they have a lot to lose. Not even just the casualties, the money, the influence of the region, the credibility, the legit credibility they give to Iran, and the influence Iran will have after all the decades that they've been back channeling, working with all these, let's say, underprivileged countries. It'll be a different strategy. And then, on the Muslim spectrum of that, because I know a lot of people say, well, that is a Muslim country. But then comes in the doctrine of Islam. Because now when people say you got to take one of the lesser evils, one of the two evils, now when you get into Islam, I said a lot of these countries are Sunni. Iran is a Shia ran country. Their national religion is Shia Islam. Shiaism. But will these be the choices that they will have from in the near future? I don't know. We're going to have to keep watching. And I think that's why it's so incumbent upon America and Israel not to let Iran win in any way. Media, propaganda, outlook, prestige, dominance, anything. They have to make them look as the enemies. Now, they said that Iran was killing 40,000 protesters. But look at this protest. I mean, look at the parade that they just had in Iran, when they was parading missiles in the middle of the streets and it was lit up. Like I said, does that look like a country that just slaughtered 40 million civilians for protesting? I don't think so. They can't allow Iran to look victorious even in the media. But now Iran is understanding that's one of the tools that we gotta put out there. We gotta show our unification. We gotta let the world know that we are loyal and dedicated to our cause. Now pictures are coming out of Iran. You think you're gonna tell me that this is always just coincidence? It could be coincidence, all right. Yeah, huh. But y'all know the motto, man. Stay tuned in, man. Take care of each other. And if you can't do that,